Then the documents that came out of this earlier work, such as the Keys of Solomon, led really, you can find the roots of the modern occult spirit communication movement. In fact, the co-founder of Golden Dawn says that this Key of Solomon included instructions on how to prepare for the summoning of spirits, included departed human beings, known as necromancy, angels, and even demons. So things are getting a little bit more organized at this time in history. It was published as a grimoire, as a tool to be able to summon these spirits, to summon 72 angels or demons, according to how they're mentioned. There's various names listed for them, Baal, others. Aleister Crowley, how you pronounce it, I see most Crowley, actually built on this, and he used this in his early days. One of the problems they've had is it's very important they pick the Messiah, and our historians say there have been several that have been chosen by them that have not worked out. And even I saw a reference that said even tarot cards, the original 72-card deck was tied to these 72 angels. And it's a common theme that goes from there. Dr. John Dee is another one who had a profound influence, particularly in the esoteric field historically. He was a mathematician and a magician in Queen Elizabeth's court. He was originally in prison for sorcery, but he was able to get out and work in Queen Elizabeth's court with a medium, Edward Kelly. I'm sure you're very familiar with this work, and developed Enochian magic, which became very important in later centuries, and they implicated angels. It's a very, very complex language and alphabet based upon the Book of Enoch, but it was found to be extremely powerful. This entity, one of the entities that they conjured from their angel communications, greatly alarmed them. One of the quotes I found in literature said that these people were quoting that Jesus was not God, and that prayers should not be made to him, even that sin did not exist, and that reincarnation was a reality. Kelly began to be relatively terrified when he started seeing these messages and backed off. There's a lot of questions about Kelly and his motives too, but this was just an incident I saw in the literature. Dr. Dee, his desire was to actually to learn wisdom and knowledge from the spirit world. He was plateauing in his capability through the study of the sciences to get the answers that he was seeking. So he turned to the spirit world. Some said also his desire was to gain recognition. He himself explained himself that said he was looked upon by others as a caller or a conjurer of wicked, damned spirits. And so he carried that concern with him. He saw himself as a pious Christian, is the way he looked upon himself. Others claimed again that he was doing this for wealth purposes. He operated in secret, although he had connection with the Rosicrucians, it can be shown. And then began to have big impacts on science. He used Euclidean geometry and navigation, made the navigational tools and maps and things that really made the expansion of the New World a possibility. He was really a foundation of that. And of course, he became really the personification of the Western wizard role model, and was the role model, as I understand it, for Faust. His angelic visions were published much later, and the particular author or publisher, their opinion was that he was actually fooled by demonic entities that portrayed themselves as such. However, regardless of his work lived on, and Enochian magic was used later extensively by Aleister Crowley, became a key part of it. And even Francis Bacon comes in the story. There's some ways that they can connect his connection with who was probably the founder of the New World as far as providing the way for that. Muhammad, I think this is someone who we could say is a significant world history player. It's claimed, as from what I've read, that he was visited at a later age by Gabriel, or one who identified himself as Gabriel. There was visits over a number of years. He was accompanied by violent seizures when these things would have happened. And in fact, he was also carried by this figure to Jerusalem, met Jesus, Abraham, Moses. In his earliest years, it was a very turbulent time, as you know, if you study history. There were a lot of wars and violent clashes between surrounding tribes at the time. And as I understand his claims amongst many was that there was basically a corruption of the true religion of Judaism and Christianity, and a corruption of their text that he set aside to correct. He's well known in Islam for monotheistic beliefs which rejected the divinity and the crucifixion of Jesus. There's no evidence that Muhammad, that I know of, I was trying to find this to start get a common thread, of either he or any revelation that he received that I could find was foretold in the earlier testaments of the prophets that he refers to. He refers a lot to Jesus, Abraham, Moses, builds on their work, but I never could find a reference to him by them. So it makes it hard to couple them together. I also found surprisingly, I didn't know that he's highly regarded by the Mormons. However, and I don't really have time for these quotes here, but if you'd like to see this later, his first biographer makes a point that Muhammad was an intriguing character. He made a lot of compromises politically for gain. He would sort of exploit the weaknesses of his enemy in various points. And this was from his own biographer at the time. But I think the bigger key episode, and one that I was not familiar of till recently, was that there was a strange episode when he was dealing with his enemies in Mecca, actually, in the city, where he actually declared that the goddesses that they worshipped were a reality, which was a big departure from what he taught in his monotheism. And he later claimed, he actually wrote that down, it was recorded, he said he was fooled by Satan and was actually punished by Gabriel because of it. So I don't know what to make of that, but I don't know if that sheds any light on what we should look at the rest of his text. In a related area, Joseph Smith, another great impact for world religion, he saw God in Jesus as a vision very young. His minister told him it was a demonic delusion, but he continued to have these visions, and what he was told that basically all the Christian denominations and groups that were ministering were wrong. Later he saw this angel well known as Moroni, although he also wrote the name down later as Nephi. So I don't know, there's a contradiction there I'm not quite sure about. But he was shown the plates and other things. He had a big problem with the law, had a lot of issues. I don't know whether it was persecution or just a personal matter. But he had a lot of criminal convictions that sort of kept him and his group on the move. Although he had other people who testified that they saw some of these materials and the angel. I guess the biggest problem he ran into when he moved west was that he had started this unchartered bank to raise money for the group in Ohio, and that forced the authorities to move him on. Something else I was not aware of was he became a master mason. And in fact, in a curiosity of history, he married, I believe it's William Morgan, the gentleman who died, some say was killed for giving away the Masonic secret. Anyway, he married his widow, became part of his family and his group. And Masons began when they were in Missouri to grow that group in a massive way. And in fact, his life continued even to a violent death that he led at that time. But of course, it started into a large international religious movement. He had a similar comment to Muhammad. He said that the churches had corrupted the teaching of the apostles, and he wanted to go back to the teaching of the apostles. I went back and tried to see where it could be possibly construed where the apostles sort of pointed to a time in the future when someone like Joseph Smith would be called, or his theology, such as priesthood or polygamy. I couldn't find any evidence of that. And of course, he talked about New World visits of Jesus and other events that are unique to Mormon history. So we'll just move on from there. Here's a couple interesting quotes. I don't have time for these two gentlemen in great depth, but I'll just mention Emanuel Swedenborg, who is very, very highly regarded for his work in spirit communications. He was considered an angel medium. Some of the things that distinguished them from the regular Orthodox Christianity, he rejected Christ's atoning work on the cross and the concept of eternal punishment. That's is my understanding as a non-scholar. One quote he had that's it's a good warning for all of us. He says, "Spirits narrate things wholly false and lie. When spirits begin to speak to man, care should be taken not to believe them, for most everything they say is made up by them, and they lie. So if we permitted them to relate what heaven is and how things are in heaven, they would tell us so many falsehoods and with such strong assertion that man would be astonished. Wherefore it was not permitted me, when spirits were speaking, to have any belief in what they stated. They love to feign. Whatever may be the topic spoken of, they think they know it, and if man listens and believes, they insist and in various ways deceive and seduce." He was a gentleman very experienced in communication over his entire life, so I assume he speaks with a little bit of authority about this. I'm not sure why he continued to pursue it if he had such low regard for the veracity of the information, but it's just a very interesting quote. I think it's a warning to every one of us in here that seek truth and spiritual growth. Even another one that from the Nostradamus Encyclopedia that was meant to be a compendium. One of the quotes from one of his early biographers around him, it says he indicates how it is possible, this is Nostradamus, for the diviner to open his mind to divine inspiration. Almost in the same breath, however, he beseeches his infant son never to dabble in such practices, for he says they desiccate the body, disturb the mind, and send the soul to perdition. So I think this is a little bit more the challenge side of the presentation that we have, that if we're going to make progress, we really need to consider these matters for each other. As we get into more the modern age and modern spiritualism, it's really tied into the area with Margaret Fox in Hydesville, New York, I believe. As we all know, if you read history books, spiritualism became a very popular parlor game for the wealthy. They'd go in the parlor and have seances, but obviously many in society took it very, very seriously, including some extremely well-known people that you all know. The spirit that came to her that really started a growth again in this area said that a new era was starting, and also this message about there being no death. Dr. Quimby, who sort of built on her work, began to function as a healer, and he began this message in the modern era about Jesus being a man, although a man with higher wisdom. In this particular theological position spread. Mary Eddy also became involved in these early days, and that led to her formation of the Christian Scientist group. Her goal was to correct, after hearing these discussions, to correct Bible errors, and she said that these teachings of sin and death were not correct based upon what they'd led to understand. Andrew Jefferson Davis probably was the gentleman who carried the farthest, my understanding. He also was a healer for a well-known time, built on this. He also says he astrally met Galen, the ancient physician in Swedenborg, who he then channeled beyond that. Carl Jung, I believe it's Jung, who we well know in the psychology field. He said he even had a spirit, Philemon, that he used for his work. Thank you very much, Philemon. Thank you. But as we know, governments don't leave their midst off stuff, so then the governments get involved, and we know stories of CIA and KGB. They're the last ones to the table on these things. So they started seeing there was something, content there. They got in areas of ESP and remote viewing, which we well know they got a hold of. I'm going to skip on here. We know that it's popular today, particularly on TV, about spirit contact television shows. It's something that gets more and more popular. It's very interesting, the whole concept of physical incarnation or morphogenesis. It starts usually with a smoky type apparition, and I started finding that a consistency in a variety of diverse records. And then you start seeing things like ectoplasm or other type materials that grow into body parts, or even animal shapes that will appear when these beings make themselves manifest in the physical world. It wouldn't be a complete list if I didn't go to Madame Blavatsky, who founded the Theosophical Society in 1875, matriarch of the New Age movement. She says she received her message from ascended avatars and had incredibly important followers, including Thomas Edison and Margaret Sanger, other influential politicians. Although she had some quotes that were disturbing to a lot of people. She says, one quote I found, "The appellation Satan belongs by right to the first and cruelest adversary of all other gods, Jehovah, not the serpent which spoke only words of sympathy and wisdom." This was information channeled to her, which is very similar to the Sumerian record. It's basically the same kind of a viewpoint. She also says Satan, the serpent of Genesis, is the real creator and benefactor, the father of spiritual mankind. So I consider this sort of a continuation of that common theme in mythology from Sumeria. And then there's some dark sides of the ramifications, even in the political world. The whole concept of Atlantean and Lemurian root races was exploited by Hitler, as we know, in his whole approach with Aryanism. One of the quotes from a popular author today says, she remembered that Blavatsky's work were very convincing in their day, and that many Nazi projects can be traced back to ideas popularized by her.